Captain Min-jun Park stood in the center of the massive council chamber, watching as 47 different alien species debated humanity's fate. The circular room stretched high above him, with each species sitting in their designated areas. Some floated in special atmospheric bubbles, others perched on crystal formations, and a few hung from the ceiling like giant bats. Min-jun had been Earth's representative to the Galactic Council for 5 years. In that time, he had learned one important truth. The galaxy respected only strength. Everything else was just pretty words that meant nothing when real decisions needed to be made. "The matter is simple," announced Warlord Zaxthar from his elevated platform. The reptilian Krex leader was 12 feet tall, covered in thick scales that gleamed like black metal. His voice boomed through the chamber's translation system. "These human worlds are poorly defended. They need proper protection from the dangers of space." Ambassador Kira Thorne, sitting beside Min-jun, kept her face calm. She had been a diplomat for 20 years and knew how to hide her feelings. But Min-jun could see the tension in her shoulders. They both knew what protection really meant when the Krex said it. High Counselor Velnara floated above them all in a sphere of golden light. Her species, the ethereals, were ancient beings of pure energy. They claimed to be neutral and wise, but Min-jun had noticed they always sided with whoever had the biggest military force. "The Krex Empire raises valid concerns," Velnara said, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "The Outer Rim sectors have seen increased pirate activity. Human colonies would benefit from stronger protection." Min-jun stood up slowly. The chamber fell quiet as all eyes turned to him. Even though humans had been part of the galactic community for 50 years, they were still considered newcomers by most species. "Honored Counselor," Min-jun began, using the formal address required by protocol. "Humanity appreciates the Council's concern for our safety. However, our colonies are not defenseless. We have patrol ships and security forces." A sound like laughter came from the Krex section. Several other species joined in with their own versions of amusement. The translator couldn't capture the mockery, but the meaning was clear. "Human patrol ships," Warlord Zaxthar said with what passed for a smile among his kind. "Yes, we have seen them. Very impressive for cargo escorts." More laughter echoed through the chamber. Min-jun felt his jaw tighten but kept his voice steady. "Our security forces have maintained peace in human space for decades. We see no need for outside intervention." "The matter has already been decided," announced Counselor Thrak of the Stone Hammer Collective. His species looked like living rocks with glowing crystals for eyes. "The vote was taken yesterday. 31 species voted in favor of protective custody. Only 12 opposed." Min-jun felt the words hit him like a physical blow. "Minor administrative oversight," Velnara said dismissively. "The decision stands. 3 human colonies will be placed under Krex protection: New Sol, Terra Verde, and New Manchester. The human population has 30 standard days to relocate to other worlds." 2.3 million people, Kira whispered beside him. "You want us to relocate 2.3 million people in 30 days? The Krex Empire is being generous with the timeline," Zaxthar replied. "My military advisors suggested 10 days would be sufficient." Min-jun looked around the chamber, searching for support among the other species. The Aquatic Federation representatives avoided his gaze. The hive minds were busy with their internal communications. Even the species that had voted against the measure seemed reluctant to speak up now. "What about the infrastructure?" Min-jun asked. "Will be maintained by Krex administrators," Zaxthar said. "Humans are welcome to apply for employment under the new management." The chamber erupted in quiet conversations as species discussed this development among themselves. Min-jun realized with growing horror that this had all been planned in advance. The vote, the timeline, even the employment offer. It was all designed to look legal and proper. "This is theft," Kira said, loud enough for the translation system to pick up her words. The chamber fell silent again. Several species turned to stare at her, with what Min-jun recognized as shock. No one had ever accused the council of theft before. At least, not openly. Harsh words, Ambassador, Velnara said, her golden glow dimming slightly. The council operates within established law. Weaker species have always been protected by stronger ones. This is the natural order of the galaxy. Natural order, Min-jun repeated slowly. And who decides what is natural? History decides, Zaxthar replied. The strong survive and prosper. The weak serve or perish. Your species has done well by accepting this reality. Do not ruin your position by becoming difficult now. Min-jun felt something cold settle in his stomach. In 50 years of galactic citizenship, humanity had always taken the diplomatic path. They negotiated, compromised, and accepted setbacks as the price of peace. It had worked, mostly. Human space had grown slowly but steadily, and the galaxy had accepted them as harmless traders and farmers. But now he understood the real cost of that acceptance. In the eyes of the galaxy, humanity was useful, but expendable. They were prey animals that had learned to speak. I need to contact Earth, Min-jun said. Of course, Velnara replied. Standard communication protocols apply. Please ensure your government understands that this decision is final. Resistance would be unwise. Min-jun bowed slightly, the way human diplomats had been taught to do. It showed respect without submission. At least, that's what the protocol manual said. Looking around the chamber now, he wondered if anyone had ever seen it that way. As the session ended and the various species began to leave, Min-jun and Kira walked together toward the human diplomatic section. Neither spoke until they were safely inside their offices, behind walls that blocked listening devices. They planned this, Kira said, slumping into her chair. The whole thing was coordinated. The question is why, Min-jun replied, activating the secure communication array. Why now? What's changed? As he waited for the connection to Earth to stabilize, Min-jun thought about the conversation he was about to have. How do you tell your home world that 50 years of careful diplomacy had just been swept away? How do you explain that, in the eyes of the galaxy, humanity was nothing more than a resource to be redistributed when convenient? The communication panel beeped, indicating a secure connection to Earth. Min-jun took a deep breath and began composing his report. He had a feeling this would be the last diplomatic message he would send for a very long time. The evacuation ships began arriving at New Seoul 3 days after the council's decision. Governor Sarah Kim watched from her office window as transport vessels landed in the designated zones outside the capital city. Each ship could carry about 10,000 people, but there were millions to move. The Krex ships arrived early, her aide reported, pointing to the tactical display on the wall. They're setting up positions around our orbital stations. Sarah nodded grimly. The aliens had given humanity 30 days to evacuate, but their military was already moving into position. It was becoming clear that the timeline had been more of a suggestion than a requirement. On Terra Verde, the agricultural colony that fed 6 human worlds, farmer David Chen stood in his wheat fields and watched alien fighters streak across the sky. He had worked this land for 20 years, turning empty soil into productive farmland. Now strangers were coming to take it away, and there was nothing he could do to stop them. The official communication from the Krex Empire had been polite but firm. All human civilians would be relocated to appropriate facilities for their safety. Personal belongings could be packed, but land and infrastructure would remain under Krex administration. Former residents could apply for work permits if they met certain qualifications. David crushed a handful of wheat between his fingers and let the wind carry it away. 20 years of his life, scattered like dust. Meanwhile, in the depths of space beyond Pluto, Admiral Sarah Chen floated in the command center of the starship Defiance. Around her, Holographic displays showed the positions of ships throughout human space. To most of the galaxy, these vessels were listed as cargo haulers, research ships, and civilian transports. The registration records were all perfectly legal and properly filed. The truth was somewhat different. "Status report," Admiral Chen said to her operations officer. "All Ghost fleets are in position," Commander Torres replied. "We have 7 battle groups ready to move on your command. Another 12 are standing by in reserve. And the Council's intelligence services? Still think we have about 30 ships total, all of them defensive patrol craft." Admiral Chen smiled coldly. The galaxy had made a crucial mistake. They had assumed that because humans chose diplomacy, they were incapable of anything else. For 50 years, Earth's leadership had encouraged this misconception while quietly building something the galaxy had never seen before. The Terran Defense Initiative had been classified at the highest levels. Even most humans didn't know it existed. While diplomats negotiated and traders built peaceful relationships, military engineers had been working in hidden shipyards scattered throughout human space. They had studied alien technology, improved on it, and created weapons systems that had never been tested in battle. The galaxy was about to learn why that was a problem. "Sir," the communications officer called out. "Priority message from New Sol. The Kreks have begun early occupation procedures." Admiral Chen's expression hardened. "Define early occupation." "They're restricting human movement between cities, setting up checkpoints, and, sir, they've cut off external communications from the colony." This was not part of the agreed timeline. According to the Council's decision, humans had 30 days to evacuate peacefully. The Kreks were changing the rules as they went. "Any word from Terra Verde or New Manchester?" "Similar reports, sir. The Kreks are treating this as a military occupation, not a protective custody situation." Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. Around her, the bridge crew waited for orders. These men and women had trained for years for a situation like this, but everyone had hoped it would never come. On New Sol, Governor Kim received a communication from the Kreks military commander. The message was short and direct. All human government officials were to report to the occupation headquarters within 6 hours. Any who failed to comply would be considered hostile. Kim looked around her office one last time. The walls were covered with photos of the colony's development over the past 30 years. Pictures of the first landing, the construction of the capital city, graduation ceremonies at the university they had built from nothing. "Governor," her aide said quietly, "the transport ship Aurora is requesting permission to depart. They have a full passenger manifest." Kim activated her personal communicator and sent a coded message to Admiral Chen. 3 words that would change everything. The line crossed. Then she walked to her safe and retrieved the emergency protocols that every human governor kept locked away. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The Aurora lifted off from New Sol's main spaceport, carrying 5,000 evacuees toward safety. It was a civilian transport, painted white with red crosses to mark it as non-military. The ship's captain, Maria Santos, had been running evacuation missions for 3 days without incident. That changed when the Kreks destroyer Bloodclaw moved to intercept. "Transport vessel Aurora," came the harsh voice over the communication channel. "You are departing outside authorized schedule. Return to port immediately." Captain Santos checked her flight plan. Everything was properly filed and approved. "Kreks Command, this is Aurora. We have full authorization for this departure. Our paperwork is in order. Authorization revoked. Return to port or face consequences." Santos felt her blood run cold. She had 5,000 people aboard her ship, including 800 children. "Kreks Command, we are a civilian evacuation vessel. We pose no threat to your operations. Final warning. Return to port." Santos looked at her navigation officer. They were only 10 minutes from the jump point that would take them to safety. Behind them, The Krex destroyer was powering up its weapons systems. "All passengers, prepare for emergency maneuvers," Santos announced over the ship's intercom. She pushed the Aurora's engines to maximum power, racing for the jump point. The ship wasn't built for combat maneuvers, but Santos had been a military pilot before becoming a civilian captain. She remembered how to make a transport move like a fighter. The Krex destroyer fired. The energy beam cut through Aurora's engine section, venting atmosphere and debris into space. The ship spun out of control as emergency systems fought to maintain life support. Santos managed to stop the spin, but the engines were dead. "Mayday, Mayday," she broadcast on all frequencies. "This is civilian transport Aurora. We have been fired upon and are losing life support. Requesting immediate assistance." The Krex destroyer moved closer, preparing to finish what it had started. Captain Santos watched death approaching and wondered how she was going to explain this to 5,000 scared people. Then, space around the Aurora filled with light as 20 human ships dropped out of jump space. They moved in perfect formation, weapons already charged and targeting systems locked onto the Krex destroyer. "Krex vessel, Bloodclaw," came a new voice over the communications channel. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. You have fired upon a civilian vessel. Power down your weapons immediately." The Krex captain's response was a mixture of shock and anger. "What is this? Humans do not have military vessels." "Today you learn otherwise," Admiral Chen replied. "Stand down or be destroyed." For the first time in galactic history, someone had given the Krex Empire an ultimatum. The destroyer's captain looked at his tactical display and saw that he was outgunned 20-1 by ships that shouldn't exist. He powered down his weapons. As human rescue ships moved to assist the Aurora, Admiral Chen opened a channel that broadcast throughout the galaxy. Every species that had dismissed humanity as weak prey was about to hear something new. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of Earth. For 50 years, humanity has sought peace through diplomacy. We have compromised, negotiated, and accepted setbacks in the name of galactic harmony. Today that ends." The transmission reached the Galactic Council chamber just as an emergency session was beginning. Representatives of 47 species listened in stunned silence as a human military officer they had never heard of addressed them as equals. "Any attack on human civilians will be met with force. Any attempt to seize human worlds will be resisted. The galaxy has mistaken our desire for peace as inability to fight. This was an error in judgment that will not be repeated." In his private chambers, Warlord Zaxthar stared at the tactical reports flooding in from Krex intelligence. According to their sensors, humans had just deployed more military vessels in a single engagement than their entire species was supposed to possess. "How many ships do they have?" he demanded of his intelligence chief. "Unknown, sir. Our estimates may have been inadequate." For the first time in his military career, Zaxthar felt something he had never experienced before. Uncertainty. The galaxy's natural order had just been challenged by a species everyone thought they understood. He was beginning to realize that nobody understood humans at all. The Battle of New Sol began at 0800 Galactic Standard Time, when 50 Krex warships moved to engage the human fleet that had appeared seemingly from nowhere. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching as enemy vessels approached in their traditional attack formation. "Enemy fleet composition?" she asked her tactical officer. 20 heavy cruisers, 15 destroyers, 10 assault carriers, and 5 dreadnoughts," Lieutenant Park reported. "Standard Krex battle group. They're moving in the hammer formation." Admiral Chen nodded. Human intelligence had studied Krex tactics for decades. The hammer formation was designed to crush enemies through overwhelming firepower applied at a single point. It worked well against species that fought in similar massive ship formations. Humans had developed a different approach. "All ships, implement Pack Protocol 7, Chen commanded. The human fleet scattered instantly. 20 vessels spread out across a cube of space, 50,000 kilometers on each side. To the Krex commanders, it looked like the humans were fleeing in panic. Their tactical displays showed human ships moving in seemingly random directions with no apparent coordination. Commander Vextar of the Krex flagship Worldbreaker allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Typical prey behavior, he told his officers. They run when faced with superior force. Begin pursuit. Destroy them one by one. What Commander Vextar didn't understand was that the human ships were not running randomly. They were moving according to a complex algorithm that had been developed by studying pack-hunting behavior in Earth's predatory animals. Each ship was connected to the others through quantum communication links that allowed instant coordination. The first Krex heavy cruiser, pursuing what appeared to be a fleeing human destroyer, suddenly found itself surrounded by 6 human ships that had materialized from different directions. The human vessels moved like dancers, weaving between the cruiser's weapon arcs while striking at weak points in its armor. Impossible, Commander Vextar muttered as he watched the engagement. How are they moving so fast? The human ships were smaller than their Krex counterparts, built for speed and maneuverability rather than raw firepower. Their weapons were different too. Instead of the massive energy cannons favored by most galactic species, humans used swarms of smart missiles that could change course mid-flight and target specific systems. Within 10 minutes, the Krex cruiser was dead in space, its engines disabled and weapons offline. The human ships had achieved this without destroying the vessel or killing its crew. They had simply cut it apart piece by piece until it couldn't fight back. "Sir," Lieutenant Park called out, "Captain Minjun Park is requesting permission to broadcast to the galaxy." Admiral Chen smiled. Captain Park had been Earth's diplomatic representative for years, always trying to solve problems with words instead of weapons. Now he would speak from the bridge of a human warship while alien ships burned around them. "Open the channel," Chen ordered. Captain Park appeared on screens throughout the galaxy as the battle continued. Behind him, tactical displays showed the engagement in real time. Species that had dismissed humanity as weak prey watched in shock as human ships systematically dismantled a Krex battle group. "People of the galaxy," Park began, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. "For 50 years, my species has sought peace through understanding and compromise. We have accepted insults, territorial losses, and economic disadvantages because we believed in the possibility of harmony between different peoples." On the main display, another Krex ship went dark as human vessels stripped away its defenses. The enemy formation was breaking apart as commanders realized their traditional tactics were useless against an enemy that refused to fight in straight lines. Today, the Krex Empire chose to fire upon a civilian transport carrying evacuees, including children. They chose to violate their own timeline for evacuation. They chose to treat diplomatic agreements as meaningless pieces of paper. Park paused as the human fleet executed another coordinated maneuver. 3 Krex destroyers that had been trying to surround a single human ship suddenly found themselves facing the entire human force. They surrendered without firing a shot. "Let this be clear to all species," Park continued. "Humanity does not seek conquest or domination. We never have. But we will no longer tolerate aggression against our people or theft of our worlds. The galaxy has mistaken our restraint for weakness. This was an error." In the council chambers, representatives of 47 species watched the broadcast in stunned silence. High Counselor Velnara's golden glow had dimmed to barely visible levels. Several smaller species that had been bullied for centuries began to whisper among themselves. "The Krex Empire demanded that we abandon our colonies," Park said. "We offered to negotiate. They responded by attacking our civilians. This is their choice. And these are the consequences." On the tactical display, only 15 Krex ships remained functional. Commander Vextar found himself surrounded by the entire human fleet, his massive dreadnought disabled and helpless. He had commanded fleets for 30 years and had never experienced anything like this systematic dismantling of his forces. "Krex Commander," Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication channel. Do you surrender? Vextar looked around his bridge. Half his systems were offline. His weapons were destroyed, and his engines were barely functional. In 30 minutes of combat, the humans had reduced his proud battle group to scrap metal. I surrender, he said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. The Krex Empire had not surrendered a battle in over 200 years. Medical ships are standing by to assist your wounded, Chen replied. Prepare to receive humanitarian aid. This confused Vextar even more. In his experience, victorious enemies either destroyed the defeated or demanded tribute. They didn't offer medical assistance. Human medical vessels, marked with red crosses to identify them as non-combatants, moved among the disabled Krex ships. Teams of human doctors and medics boarded the alien vessels to treat wounded crew members. They worked alongside Krex medical personnel, sharing equipment and supplies. Major Kim Sato, leading one of the medical teams, found herself working to save the life of a Krex weapons officer who had been injured when his console exploded. The alien looked at her with confusion as she used human medical technology to stabilize his injuries. Why help enemy? He asked in broken galactic standard. Because you're hurt, Kim replied simply. That's what we do. This exchange was broadcast throughout the galaxy as news networks picked up the story. Species that had expected to see humans executing prisoners or demanding surrender terms instead watched them providing medical care to their former enemies. Captain Park concluded his broadcast from the bridge of the Defiance. The galaxy operates on the principle that might makes right. We reject this principle. Strength should protect the weak, not exploit them. Power should be used to build peace, not enforce submission. As the human fleet began securing the area around New Sol, Admiral Chen received reports from the other threatened colonies. Krex forces at Terra Verde and New Manchester had withdrawn after witnessing the destruction of their battle group. The immediate crisis was over, but Chen knew this was just the beginning. News of the battle was spreading throughout the galaxy, and reactions were already coming in. Some species were demanding action against the human threat. Others were asking quiet questions about human military capabilities. Sir, the communications officer reported, we're receiving surrender requests from Krex garrison forces on all 3 contested worlds. They want to evacuate immediately. Grant their requests, Chen ordered. Provide safe passage and medical assistance if needed. And sir, the Galactic Council has called an emergency session. They're demanding that Earth explain itself. Admiral Chen looked at the tactical display showing the aftermath of the battle. Disabled Krex ships were being towed to safety by human vessels, while medical teams worked to save lives on both sides. Tell the Council that Captain Park will address them in 12 hours, she said. And make sure they understand that he'll be speaking as a representative of a military power, not a client species begging for recognition. For the first time in galactic history, the Council would be negotiating with humans from a position of weakness. The natural order of the galaxy had just been turned upside down, and nobody knew what would happen next. But one thing was certain: the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. The Galactic Council's emergency session convened 18 hours after the Battle of New Sol. Representatives from 47 species filled the Great Chamber. But the atmosphere was different from previous meetings. Where once there had been casual confidence, now there was tension and uncertainty. High Counselor Velnara floated in her sphere of diminished golden light, addressing the assembly. The human attack on Krex forces represents a clear violation of galactic peace accords. This aggression cannot be allowed to stand. Warlord Zaxthar, his scales darker than usual with stress, stood to address the chamber. The humans have revealed themselves as a threat to the established order. Intelligence reports suggest they possess far more military capacity than previously estimated. Captain Minjun Park entered the chamber through the main doors, walking calmly to the human diplomatic section. But, he was not alone. Behind him came Admiral Sarah Chen and a full honor guard of human military personnel in crisp uniforms. The galaxy was seeing human soldiers for the first time, and many representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "The chair recognizes the human delegation," Velnara announced, her tone noticeably cooler than in previous sessions. Captain Park stepped forward, but his posture was different now. Where once he had stood as a petitioner, asking for consideration, now he carried himself as an equal among equals. "Honored Council," Park began, "humanity comes before you today, not to apologize, but to correct several dangerous misconceptions that have led to recent violence." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. No one had expected the humans to take an aggressive stance. For 50 years, this council has operated under the assumption that humanity was weak and defenseless. This assumption was encouraged by my government as a strategic decision. We believed that appearing harmless would allow us to build peaceful relationships with our galactic neighbors. Park activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. It showed star charts of human space, but not the version the Council had been using for decades. This map revealed the true scope of human expansion, including colonies and installations that had been hidden from galactic surveys. "This is the real human territory," Park announced. 43 worlds, not the 19 officially recognized by the Council. Over 8 billion human citizens, not the 3 billion in your records, and a military force specifically designed to defend our people from exactly the kind of aggression we witnessed 3 days ago. The chamber erupted in angry voices as representatives realized the scope of human deception. Several species were shouting simultaneously, demanding explanations and making accusations. Admiral Chen stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise. "The question before this council is simple. Will you continue to operate under the principle that strength justifies theft? Or will you accept that some species choose to be strong in order to protect rather than exploit?" Counselor Thrak of the Stonehammer Collective rose from his crystal formation. "You speak of protection, but you have violated the fundamental structure of galactic society. The strong rule, the weak serve. This has been the natural order for millennia." "Natural order," Park repeated. "And who benefits from this natural order?" "The species with the largest fleets and the most destructive weapons. But what happens when those species encounter something stronger?" As if summoned by his words, the chamber's communication systems activated. Reports were flooding in from across the galaxy as human military forces revealed themselves. Hidden bases were coming online, stealth ships were decloaking, and defense networks that had been invisible for decades suddenly appeared on sensors throughout human space. "The Terran Defense Initiative consists of 1,200 combat vessels," Admiral Chen announced. "They have been positioned throughout human space for the past 20 years, waiting for exactly this situation. Every human world is protected by orbital defense platforms that your fleets cannot detect until they choose to reveal themselves." Warlord Zaxthar studied the intelligence reports flooding into his personal display. "Impossible. Our surveys showed no evidence of these installations." "Because you were looking for Krek-style military bases," Admiral Chen replied. "Large, obvious structures, designed to intimidate. Human military doctrine is based on concealment and protection. Our weapons are hidden until they're needed, and they're designed to disable rather than destroy." This last point confused many of the Council representatives. Most galactic military forces were built around the concept of overwhelming destruction as a deterrent. "You could have destroyed our battle group completely," Zaxthar said, his voice showing a mixture of respect and bewilderment. "Why show mercy to enemies?" Captain Park answered. "Because we understand something that the galaxy seems to have forgotten. Today's enemy can become tomorrow's ally, but only if you give them a reason to change their mind." The chamber fell silent as representatives considered this radical concept. In their experience, defeated enemies were either destroyed or enslaved. The idea of helping them recover was foreign to most galactic species. The Council demands immediate compliance with established protocols, Velnara declared. Human military forces will withdraw to recognize territory and submit to inspection by Council authorities. Admiral Chen's response was polite but firm. Respectfully, no. The simple refusal sent shockwaves through the chamber. No species had ever directly refused a Council directive. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council effective immediately, Park announced. We will form our own alliances with species that share our values of mutual protection and peaceful cooperation. Before the Council could respond, several smaller species stood up simultaneously. The Aquatic Federation's representative spoke first. The Federation requests details about these new alliances. Representatives from 6 more species echoed similar statements. These were the minor powers that had been bullied and exploited by the larger empires for centuries. The sight of someone successfully standing up to the Council had given them hope. Warlord Zaxthar realized what was happening and felt panic creeping into his thoughts. If the smaller species aligned with humanity, the balance of power in the galaxy would shift dramatically. This is rebellion, he declared. The Council will not tolerate the formation of unauthorized alliances. Then the Council will enforce its will through military action, Admiral Chen replied. Are you prepared for that level of escalation? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone in the chamber understood the implications. The Krex Empire had just lost a major battle group to a human force that had been holding back. How many more human fleets were hidden throughout space? How many other military secrets did humanity possess? High Counselor Velnara's golden glow flickered as she processed the changing situation. For the first time in millennia, the Council faced an enemy that couldn't be intimidated or bribed into submission. The Council will recess for consultation, she announced. As the various species began leaving the chamber, Captain Park made one final announcement. Any species that wishes to discuss mutual defense agreements may contact the human embassy. We offer protection to those who cannot protect themselves, and alliance to those who share our commitment to peace through strength. Walking back to the human diplomatic section, Admiral Chen spoke quietly to Captain Park. You realize we've just declared war on the galactic establishment? Park nodded grimly. They declared war on us when they decided our colonies were theirs to redistribute. We're just making it official. Behind them, representatives of the smaller species were already forming groups, discussing the possibilities that humanity had just offered them. For centuries, they had been forced to choose between submission and destruction. Now, there was a third option: alliance with someone strong enough to protect them. The Galactic Council had ruled through fear and intimidation for thousands of years. Today, for the first time, they had encountered something they had never faced before. A species that was stronger than they appeared, and principled enough to use that strength in defense of others. The galaxy's balance of power had just shifted, and nobody knew where it would settle. 6 months after the Battle of New Sol, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The Great Council Chamber, that had once hosted 47 species, now held only 23. The others had quietly withdrawn to form what the news networks called the Protection Alliance, with humanity at its center. Captain Minjun Park stood in the same chamber where he had once pleaded for his people's colonies. Now he was addressing the reformed Galactic Council as the elected spokesperson for 31 species that had chosen cooperation over domination. The Alliance offers these terms one final time, Park said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who spoke for billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. Complete withdrawal of all military forces from territories claimed through intimidation. Establishment of neutral zones around smaller species worlds, and recognition of the right of all peoples to self-determination. High Counselor Velnara, her golden glow now barely visible, floated silently above the depleted assembly. The ethereals had lost much of their influence as species after species chose to leave the traditional council structure. Warlord Zox Thar had been replaced as the Krek's representative. The new leader, Commander Velkara, was younger and less aggressive than her predecessor. She had been one of the officers rescued by human medical teams after the Battle of New Sol, and the experience had changed her perspective on humanity. The Krek's Empire formally accepts the alliance terms, Velkara announced. We also request consideration for membership in the Protection Alliance. This declaration sent shockwaves through the remaining council members. The Krek's Empire had been one of the primary enforcers of the old order. Their defection meant the end of any hope of maintaining the traditional power structure. Admiral Sarah Chen, now serving as the Alliance's military coordinator, activated a holographic display showing the current galactic situation. Green areas marked Alliance territory, red showed the remaining Council holdouts, and yellow indicated neutral zones. The transition period has been largely peaceful, Admiral Chen reported. Former Council military bases in contested territories have been converted to humanitarian aid stations. Refugee resettlement programs have helped over 50 million beings relocate to safer worlds. The numbers told the real story of the galaxy's transformation. While the old Council had maintained order through military might, the Alliance had grown through voluntary association. Species joined not because they feared conquest, but because they valued the protection and cooperation humanity offered. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Alliance's chief medical officer, stood to present her report. Medical cooperation between Alliance species has accelerated development of treatments for 17 major diseases. The Aquatic Federation's regenerative medicine techniques, combined with human surgical procedures and Centaurian pharmaceutical knowledge, have saved over 2 million lives in the past 6 months. This was the aspect of the new order that confused the remaining council members most. Instead of exploiting their military advantage, humans had focused on sharing technology and knowledge. Alliance worlds were becoming more prosperous and secure, while council territories struggled with internal conflicts and resource shortages. The question remains, announced Councillor Thrak, his crystal formation dimmer than it had been months earlier. What prevents the Alliance from becoming another empire? What stops humanity from eventually demanding tribute and submission like every other dominant species? Captain Park looked around the chamber, remembering his first day here when he had been dismissed as a representative of weak prey animals. Because we remember what it feels like to be underestimated and threatened. We know the cost of living in fear, and we refuse to inflict that cost on others. But power corrupts, insisted Councillor Mortax of the Hive Minds. History shows that all dominant species eventually abuse their position. Admiral Chen activated another display. This one, showing the Alliance's governmental structure. That's why we built safeguards into our system. No single species, including humanity, can control Alliance policy. Every decision requires majority consent from member worlds. And our military forces are bound by strict rules of engagement that prioritize protection over conquest. The display showed something unprecedented in galactic history. A military force that was actually controlled by civilian oversight. Alliance fleets could defend member worlds, but they couldn't launch offensive operations without approval from the Alliance Congress, which represented all member species equally. More importantly, Park added, we've learned that real strength comes from cooperation, not domination. An alliance of willing partners is stronger than an empire of conquered subjects. The proof was visible in the chamber itself, where the old council had required elaborate protocols to prevent conflicts between hostile species. The alliance representatives worked together with casual efficiency. Former enemies sat side by side, combining their knowledge and resources for mutual benefit. Velkara of the Kreks spoke again. My people spent centuries believing that strength meant the ability to take what we wanted. The humans taught us that true strength means the ability to protect what matters. We lost the battle, but we gained something more valuable. Partners, instead of subjects. Her words carried particular weight because the Kreks' transformation had been so dramatic. Under the Alliance's influence, they had redirected their military might toward disaster relief and border security. Former Krex war fleets now served as rapid response teams for natural disasters and humanitarian crises. The old order is ending, High Counselor Velnara said, her voice barely audible. Perhaps it is time for the Ethereals to consider new arrangements. One by one, the remaining Council species began announcing their intention to join the Alliance or establish neutral relationships. The age of galactic domination through military intimidation was coming to an end. 6 hours later, Captain Park stood in the human embassy on Council Station Alpha, looking out at the ships in the orbital docks. Krex vessels worked alongside Aquatic Federation bioships and human destroyers, their crews cooperating on joint missions throughout Alliance space. Ambassador Kira Thorne joined him at the window. "Remember when we thought diplomacy had failed?" "Diplomacy never failed," Park replied. "We just learned that sometimes you have to be strong enough to enforce diplomatic solutions." A communication panel chimed, indicating an incoming message from Earth. The message was brief but significant. 3 more species had requested Alliance membership, including 2 former Council powers that had held out until now. "What's our response?" Admiral Chen asked as she reviewed the applications. "Same as always," Park replied. "Welcome them as equals, share our technology and protection, and show them that cooperation works better than conquest." Through the window, they watched as a human medical ship docked next to a former Krex destroyer. The 2 vessels were preparing for a joint mission to deliver aid to refugees from a collapsed government in the Outer Rim. It was exactly the kind of cooperation that the old Galactic Order would have considered impossible. "The galaxy learned something important," Admiral Chen observed. "The most dangerous beings in the universe aren't those who fight for conquest, but those who fight for the right to live in peace." Captain Park nodded, watching alien crews work together on the docks below. They also learned that humanity's greatest weapon was never our military technology. It was our refusal to become the monsters we fought against. As news of the Alliance's expansion spread throughout the galaxy, species that had spent millennia living in fear began to hope for something better. The age of empires was ending, replaced by something unprecedented. A galactic community based on mutual protection and voluntary cooperation. The galaxy had expected humanity to retaliate with conquest and domination. Instead, they had offered partnership and protection. It was a lesson that would reshape galactic civilization for generations to come. In systems throughout Alliance space, children of dozens of different species played together in safety, learned from each other's cultures, and grew up expecting cooperation instead of conflict. They would inherit a galaxy very different from the one their parents had known. The transformation was complete. The prey had become the protectors, and the galaxy was better for it.